The US Senate and the White House have locked horns over America's support for Saudi Arabia. Senators are demanding that the government ends military aid to the Saudi-led war effort in Yemen. Here's how the US Secretary of State reacted to the move.
They're considering debating a resolution on the Senate floor, which we think is just poorly timed.
This is what the decision is all about on the floor of the United States Senate.
Passing a resolution at this point, it would encourage the Houthis, it would encourage the Iranians.
We will no longer be part of their destructive military adventurism.
And hopefully get a ceasefire in Yemen, something that we have diplomatically been striving for months, and we think we're right on the cusp of that.
We were fueling the bombers that the Saudis sent into Yemen.
Well, the vote comes amid the ongoing anger over the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the dissident journalist murdered last month inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Caleb Morpin has more on Washington's current divisions.
Well, the vote was 63 to 37, with support on both sides of the aisle. The resolution called for the United States to end any cooperation with the Saudi-led attack on Yemen. Now, one of the voices speaking in favor of the resolution was U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont.
We have been providing the bombs that the Saudi-led coalition is using. We have been refueling their planes before they drop those bombs. This is a vote that says to the world, we are going to end the horrific humanitarian disaster that is killing tens and tens of thousands of defenseless children in Yemen.
There was opposition to this resolution from the White House, very strong. We heard that there was a closed-door session in Congress. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, addressed members of the U.S. Senate and urged them not to pass this resolution, arguing that somehow this resolution would actually hurt the conditions of those living in Yemen.
The suffering in Yemen grieves me, but if the United States of America was not involved in Yemen, it would be a hell of a lot worse.
It's been widely reported that the United States prevented a resolution in the United Nations that would have condemned the Saudi attacks on Yemen. The resolution had support from the United Kingdom, among others, and essentially would have called on Saudi Arabia to cease its activities that harmed civilians. However, the United States worked behind the scenes to prevent it from becoming a resolution. Now, there has been widespread opposition and condemnation to Saudi Arabia's activities in Yemen. We've heard statements from charities that have come forward, humanitarian organizations, and said that essentially Saudi activities put 14 million people at risk of malnutrition. However, the United States continues to align with Saudi Arabia. Now, it's important to point out that this is not the first time there have been votes on Capitol Hill regarding this issue. And back in March, the U.S. Senate was presented with the opportunity to vote on this resolution and failed to do so. They did not pass this resolution. However, today, as we have seen, they did actually come forward and condemn Saudi Arabia's activities in Yemen. Not much has changed in Yemen since March. However, what has changed is there has been widespread outrage about the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Secretary of Defense James Mattis came forward and essentially argued that while he was concerned about the plight of civilians in Yemen, this resolution was the wrong move.
Our security interests cannot be dismissed, even as we seek accountability for what President Trump described as the unacceptable and horrible crime of Jamal Khashoggi's murder.
The Saudi bombing has been responsible for the majority of the death and destruction in Yemen and has led to this tremendous famine, the largest outbreak of cholera in modern history, and none of that seemed to move the elected officials in this country enough to do anything about it. And it was the death of a Washington Post journalist, a Saudi, but somebody who was known to people in the elite circles in Washington, D.C., that really led to the kind of vote that we're seeing. There's a strong, what I call a pro-war lobby, which is made up of the weapons industry. And as long as the American people didn't pay attention, the media didn't show us the results of the bombings, the dead civilians, the starving children, Congress was happy to go along and not do anything about it.
Well, Saudi Arabia strongly denies attacking civilians, saying that it only targets Houthi rebels whom they consider terrorists. Meanwhile, the situation continues to deteriorate every day in Yemen, which is already described as one of the worst humanitarian crises on the planet. Just a warning that some of the following images are upsetting to watch.
you.